Design Board for April 12th, 2010. We'll start with public comment. Any item that is not currently on the agenda. Seeing nobody, we will go on to item B, which is approval of the minutes. And that is for March 29th. Do we have a first and a second? First by Gary, second by Bernie. I was not here, so I'm going to abstain. And Mr. Carroll. So other people who are here, were there comments on the minutes? No comments? All right, so I'll call for a vote of the minutes as presented. All in favor? Opposed? And abstain? 2. Good job, Gloria. We will move on to the consent calendar of April 5th.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For consent last week, April 5th, we had item A, 515 Conejo Road. Got final approval of the architecture as submitted with landscaping to return. Item B, 305 Sherman Road was continued indefinitely. Item C, 30 Tinker Way, got a final approval with conditions. Item D, 50 Rincon Vista Road, got a final approval with conditions. And consent was reviewed by Bill Mahan and Denise Woolery.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar? Yes, it was.
Oh, you were there. Okay, I wasn't here. Okay, Bill Mahan and Aaron Carroll.
Good catch. Okay, any other comments? Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Make the motion.
Motion by Glenn. Second by?
Second.
Gary. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. April 12th, which is today.
Okay, for consent calendar today, I had, by mistake, I put 960 West Mountain Drive on our full board agenda today, and it was continued to the consent calendar. Last time it was reviewed twice at full board, and it was continued to the consent calendar. So we reviewed it on consent calendar. Bill Mahan and Denise reviewed it on consent this morning. So I was wondering if you could ratify this consent calendar after the agenda time for that item. I think it's scheduled for 4:15.
Yes, it is.
So if we hold off just in case we have any public showing up for that item, if we hold off and ratify the item after that time, if we know no one's here. No one showed up at consent, and I haven't corresponded with anybody about that project at all.
Okay.
It's not a T-Fire project. It was a new house on a vacant lot.
Was this the sod roof one?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So let's remember
we'll hold
to
off on
ratify
that.
that consent.
I've got it circled.
That time.
So with that, we'll postpone on the April 12th until about 4:15 today, consent calendar. So we'll move to item D, which is announcements and requests by applicants.
One announcement would be that this 960 West Mountain Drive won't be on this agenda. It was reviewed at consent earlier today.
Okay.
And item 6, 129 Calle Bello, will be postponed 2 weeks.
Okay.
So I contacted the applicants for items 4 and 5 and asked them to come in a little bit earlier. And
Okay.
Bill Mahan said he'll arrive a little bit late today. And that's all I have for announcements.
Alrighty. So we'll move on to...
Mr. Chair?
Oop.
Your announcements?
Yes.
I will be stepping down for item 4.
1 second. Okay. Any other announcements? If not, we'll move on to subcommittee reports, which there are none. So we'll move on to the first item of the agenda, which is the miscellaneous action item.
Good afternoon, Chair Zink and members of the Single Family Design Board. My name is Heather Baker. I'm a project planner on the Design Review and Historic Preservation team. And we sent a memo to you last week regarding your final review of the single-family residential design guidelines and single-family design board guidelines updates, which we've been working together on. This is a summary of the review process that the NPO update to your review has undergone. And so as you can see, we've had a number of meetings, and this is our final check. We've gone over so many different topics with you in this brief review, and have incorporated the revisions that your board agreed upon into the two guideline documents. So really the check today is to make sure that everything got in correctly, make sure that we didn't miss anything, that it's formatted right, that everything is ready for council review and adoption basically, which we're hoping to have happen here on the 27th. The other step prior to going to council will be Historic Landmarks Commission this Wednesday. They'll be reviewing everything since it'll be their first time seeing the package, including the ordinance revisions that do affect projects beyond just single family because of the expiration of approvals and the project extension processes that are outlined in the ordinance. So that'll probably be something that they'll be commenting more on versus the rest of the documents. So for today, there were a couple things that didn't get into the guidelines. There is just a couple new things that have changed since we last met with you, so we'll focus on those. And so for the single-family residential design guidelines, as far as the formatting, since you're seeing that in the format of the actual guidelines now, they have been renumbered because we added the guideline regarding basements as number 18. The carport guidelines that were in the document, we've expanded a little bit because we realized that we had all these guidelines for uncovered parking, but we didn't have the similar level of detail for carports. And I know the board doesn't normally look at carports very often, but in the rare cases where they do come up, it seemed appropriate to include some additional provisions for that. We also had some public comment at the ordinance committee hearing. I emailed the comment letters to you from that hearing. And there was one comment regarding fencing and how it can create problems between properties of blocking views. And so, of course, we don't formally look at private views, but we do have the good neighbor tips. And so I added a little language there, which I have in a PowerPoint slide. And then the last part for this document is the supplemental information at the end, which I'll scroll through so you can see some of the pages that we updated. And these weren't updates due to the NPO review, but updates due to a more comprehensive zoning program changes that took place a couple years ago, spearheaded by the zoning team, affecting all parts of the ordinance. So the information in here just simply needed to be updated to reflect that. And then we can look at partial basement illustrations if we have some available to look at today, but that's the kind of the last to-do item in this document. So with the carport design guidelines, again, those were on page 13, so I hope you had a chance to review those. Basically, do you want to just take a moment to read through to see if you have any comment on this one? One of them we already had, which is 5.13, and that's construction over carports is strongly discouraged. Excuse me. Yeah, and then we added to say that garages are usually preferred over carports. So we just go into high quality materials that should match the main structure, that if it's matching the main structure, sloped roofs are preferred. The typical proposal that you might see for a flat roof carport is usually not acceptable depending on the style. We talk about substantial posts being needed, pedestrian pathways connecting to the main structure, just like we would like for a garage or uncovered space. Landscaping as appropriate, and then again that storage issue comes up, and we just went with the 200 cubic yards for this particular case. As you know, it's ended up at 120 square feet for uncovered cases, so this just seemed fairly reasonable. Again, I know that your board doesn't see these very often, but we thought these would be helpful for cases where they do come up. Okay, so then for the fencing language, this is all that was added here. Avoid tall landscaping, and we just added fences or walls that interfere with your neighbor's views. Consider the mature plant growth height when selecting plants. And again, this is just in the tips section. This isn't guidelines that you have the responsibility for enforcing. Okay, and then the next item, Mr. Chair, Mr. Mahan, do we have any illustrations today that we might be able to?
I haven't
No?
had a chance.
Okay, yeah. So what I'd like to propose is that the staff can work with the subcommittee on the illustrations for this particular page, if that would be okay with the majority of the board.
Photographs to show you, but I haven't had a chance to do that.
Okay. And so then for the single-family design board guidelines, which is this document that was mailed to you, they were combined into one document. They're still called 3 parts, but it's one document, which is one table of contents and sequential page numbering. And so the other things is, again, the carport, we realized that we could have some administrative approval criteria in a case where they might not be visible to the public. And so, again, it's many of the same guidelines that were in the proposed for the other document. But the main thing here is that in order for staff to review them, they really would need to be not publicly visible. And the other change here is that we did go ahead and include a definition for publicly visible. And this was in the package that went to the ordinance committee as well, just in case there was concern about this. So we're basically saying it's a building structure or improvements is publicly visible if it may be typically, reasonably, and usually observable by an average person. Now that phrase comes from the publicly visible references that we already have in the ordinance regarding signs, regulations for vending machines. So we thought it would be good just to go ahead and mirror that language. And then traveling upon a public right-of-way or visible from a public park, beach, or other area generally open for public use. And then if the building structure improvement is only visible from a very distant viewing location where it's not readily discernible, then the building structure or improvement is not considered publicly visible. So this gets at that issue of, like, what if it's just this little pin off in the distance up on the Riviera, like to the point where you couldn't really tell the difference in the materials, colors, style, and so, at that point it's not really considered publicly visible for purposes of determining if staff could take a look at a project or not. And we'll use our judgment carefully to make sure that if it's something that you can tell what the details are, that it would be coming to consent calendar if it's called for in the guidelines. Okay, so that's really where we're at. It's just a final check-in with those couple little things, and then the recommendation today is that the board would forward the guidelines to the council with a recommendation for adoption later this month. And I'm available for questions and comments. We do have 2 public comment letters on this item that we received. One is from Paula Westbury, and the other is from Karen Frickland, apparently on the behalf of the Citywide Homeowners Association. And that was an email that was received this afternoon.
Can I start by asking a question having to do about that last email from the Citywide Neighborhood Homeowners Association? We are not changing any of the square footage, FAR, any of the numbers. This
Correct.
is just, okay.
Right. Yeah. So I think, as we knew coming into this process, there both parts of the community that had various opinions on the FAR numbers might not have been satisfied with that original process, but we knew that it seemed like we'd come to a good compromise. So it was consciously decided by the City Council not to reopen that discussion.
Yeah,
so,
that's fine.
Yeah.
Are there questions from the board for staff? Yes.
How did the staff address at the ordinance committee? There was quite a bit of input regarding fences that block private views. Remember that particular issue? And I think at least the majority of the ordinance committee suggested that the guidelines would protect views as much as was legally possible. I think those were Bendy's words, actually. I mean, Councilman White's words. Did staff address that at all, that issue?
Yeah, just this one slide here shows that in the Good Neighbor tips section on page 79 in your guidelines, it talks about private views, and so there was already this tip here: avoid tall landscaping that interferes with your neighbor's views. So staff just went ahead and added fences or walls, acknowledging that can be an issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from board members? Bernie.
Thank you for all your incredible work, I've been getting all this stuff and trying to look through it, and I had a question on the metal poles are not an acceptable solution for carport design. And so I interpret that as these, I guess they come in a box and you put them up and they are used for carports. And they're all over town. But when we're talking about carports, we're just not even looking at anything like that as a building option. And the ones that we are looking at follow the guidelines in here.
Yes, that's correct. And actually, the metal poles, sometimes you'll see like walkways with just the thin metal pole. It could actually be a permanent metal pole, but we're saying that we want something that looks substantial, so that aesthetically that usually looks better to have a substantial support for a structure. Yeah.
I would ask one comment, because right here you have the word thin metal poles are not acceptable, and somewhere else it just says metal poles are not acceptable, and it would be good to add thin to it because that describes the type of metal.
Okay, we can do that.
Just exposed metal pole.
I don't,
Structurally,
because structurally we use metal poles a lot. Any other questions for from the board? Gary?
I had some questions about the 3.3 definition, and on the second portion.
What page are you on, just real quick?
I'm on page 13.
Okay.
On the second portion of it, it says if the building, structure, or improvement is only visible from a very distant viewing location where the building, structure, or improvement will not be readily discernable from the viewing location, the building or structure or improvement is not considered publicly visible. And my issue with that statement is only visible from a very distant viewing location is not very specific. And I don't know what a very distant viewing location is. Some people might say it's across the street. Some people might say it's from a hillside. Some people might say it's from a distance. And I just felt like it just seems like it's a loophole to me. And I was wondering if staff can clarify that.
Mr. Chair, Chairmember Mosel, I doubt that any staff member would interpret very distant as meaning across the street. I mean, that would not be a very distant location. Very distant would mean, again, that it's to the point where the details of the project are not discernible. So, I mean, the idea is that we would be using this conservatively.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
To follow up on that, though, we look out the window here up at the Riviera, and we see things that we don't like. I know there's a big, huge retaining wall up there that's come before the board a number of times. There's a couple of Sycamore Canyon fire houses that precipitated the first neighborhood preservation ordinance. I mean, viewing from here to the Riviera that's a distant view, but it still has an impact on the aesthetics of the Riviera, and it is important. So I agree with Gary. I think that's got to be. We need to think about that a little further.
Mr. Chair, if I could respond. So the way we have the language set up is that, so this example that you're referring to, the retaining wall would be discernible from this distance, and so therefore it is considered publicly visible, because it's saying that if it's to the point where the building, structure, improvement would not be readily discernible. Well, the example you've given is readily discernible, so staff would not be able to review it. Yeah. So we're thinking more like, let's say someone's changing a porch detail or something on a house, and so from this distance you wouldn't be able to see that porch detail, whereas obviously a large retaining wall is questionable, and so we wouldn't feel comfortable removing that, and we'd refer it to consent calendar or full board as necessary.
Well, you also referred this in the deck section. You referred this same definition. under decks. Is that correct?
Right, so a very small deck, maybe at the side of the house, might not be discernible from this distance, where if it's a larger deck, then it could be, especially if it's got elevated supports and so forth.
It was basically a first floor deck versus a second story deck.
Correct, yeah.
I actually had one question for staff. What was the outcome of the board? I forget when we took a vote on uncovered parking spaces. How did that staff relate to that in putting together these documents?
We had a majority vote to accept what the proposal was the last time we were here. I believe it was 2 against.
Okay.
So going forward with the majority vote, we just incorporated what the proposal was at that time. That hasn't changed.
Just wanted to
Yeah, the
refresh my
ordinance
memory.
committee looked at the 120 square foot and accepted that. They actually didn't discuss that item in much detail. The most of the comment at the ordinance committee was regarding the 2-star and the 3-star for this built green. I mean, there was some concern expressed on the ordinance committee about storage provisions, and Mr. Mahan was there, which was really helpful, and responded that in his opinion that the SFDB wouldn't be accepting 2 uncovered parking proposals very often. That would be a rare case, was
Right.
the response. So,
Great. So is there any more discussion from the board on this matter? Then can we go back to what the text... Would someone like to make a motion that says what's on the screen? Or something similar?
I will make a motion that we recommend this single-family design recommends a revised single-family review design guidelines and single-family design board guidelines presented at today's hearing for approval of the city council. So if that's on the screen, I just made a motion to recommend that.
Do we have a second on that?
Second.
All right. Any other discussion?
I would like to just make one more point, since I know this is the last chance. And I tried looking through here, Heather, to see if any distinction was made between roof decks and decks, and I didn't really see much. Is there any way that we're differentiating that, or is it just all falling under the same guideline?
are you referring to the board guidelines or the residential design guidelines?
Well, any changes that we're making.
Yeah, Tony's showing me how in the administrative approval criteria that we refer to decks above the first floor as not eligible for administrative review. So, but we don't.
What
use
page is-
page 9. We don't use the term roof decks per se. I thought that at one point we did have a guideline regarding discouraging them in general, though. In the
Well, we
residential
used
design
to, but I don't know what happened to it.
Let's take a quick little minute and look for that.
So we'll just go ahead and add that since we don't have it. I think instead we had just
What would you
lumped
be
them all
adding?
together. So we're on page 68N at this point, and there's 36.2 upper story decks.
Can
and
you wait one
balconies.
second? 68N.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a category 36.2 guideline, upper story decks and balconies.
Okay.
So it's stating avoid or minimize the number of decks that overlook neighboring properties, locate them to minimize the loss of privacy. If they're facing the street, it's usually preferable than facing yard areas adjacent to a neighbor. And then it has a number of ways to minimize impacts. So we could either add a new 36 36.3 specifically to roof decks, just saying they're generally discouraged. Or we could add that as a sub-bullet to this 36.2, just stating that they're generally discouraged. It'd probably be fine as a sub-bullet, is my guess. So, is that correct that the board just generally discourages roof decks?
I would say that that's. I'm not really willing to make that as a blanket statement if it was designed well. What I could say is under 36.2.3, it says locate second-story balconies and decks to avoid direct sight lines.
Mm-hmm.
So a second-story deck is really the roof of the first floor. So you could say locate second-story balconies and roof decks to avoid direct sight lines.
So I guess I'm picturing the roof deck as being on the top floor of a building.
Like the third floor?
Well, let's say if it's a two-story building, that it would be on top of the second floor is what I'm picturing.
We
Yeah.
actually had one 2 weeks ago.
So you call that a roof deck as well, then? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So then, yeah, that's a broader term than I was imagining.
Can I, Mr. Chair?
Please.
It seems to me like that the roof deck on the garage, which would be a second floor roof deck, is probably okay. Roof deck on the roof of the second story, I think should be very, very carefully scrutinized and should probably be discouraged. That's my personal feeling. I think this is where we've seen problems with these roof decks up on the. They're starting to become a third story with the 42-inch railing that you've got to have. I think we should try to encourage people to do roof decks on the roof of a first floor, wing or whatever that is. That's more reasonable.
Does that make sense?
Sure, that's fine. Do you want to take a straw vote from the board? Or?
Well, what I'm thinking, if we wanted to add something really quick to address what Bernie was saying, on the first one saying that second floor decks on the, which says second story balconies and decks above the first floor, we address one way, and decks on the second floor element or on the roof of the second floor are discouraged. I think the board collectively can agree with that statement. Or should be avoided, would be discouraged depending on site configurations.
So just make that a separate sub item for that guideline.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, Bernie.
I think we also want to have some kind of a cautionary piece of language that even a single-story home that's very tall with a roof deck might not be compatible. So it isn't just the story that's defining the appropriateness or compatibility.
We already have that written down because on page 68N, it says avoid direct sight lines from the deck or balcony to neighbors, windows, open yards, patios, decks, or loggia areas. So we address...
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I was under the impression that we do want guidelines for these decks and as far as sites and things like that, but a blanket statement of discouraging decks or upper story decks is not what we're looking for. We have the guidelines of the setbacks and screenings, but a blanket statement of saying that we're discouraging roof decks
on the third, basically creating a third floor.
Well, the statement was second story
roof, which is what his drawing is. Yeah.
So,
let's leave it all off. We'll catch it the next time.
I think we should.
Heather, in this document here, when I'm looking at F1 on page 9, I mean these are the requirements that people have to meet if staff is going to do an administrative approval. Isn't that true? And item number 1 says new decks are to scale and style which is compatible with the structure. I think this gets at what Bernie is concerned about, and the board's discretion would be judging whether any deck, any roof deck, is to scale and style which is compatible with the structure. And I think that if we had that kind of verbiage in there, which is in here already for the administrative, that would give guidance to the board and to the applicant as to what they can do. I'm thinking that a third-story deck that is very, very typical in New England is a thing called the Widow's Walk. And it's up there, and it's sunk down into the roof, and it usually has a little bit of a filigree around there, so you know that there's a Widow's Walk up there, but it's very, very appropriate to the architecture and not objectionable at all. So there are ways to do it, but it has to be done right and be compatible with the architecture.
Yes.
Then isn't it really what we're all saying is that we want those decks, all those types of decks, to come in front of the full board, and we don't necessarily want administrative
I think
approval
we're
of
going
them.
sideways on this deal, and I think we'll just leave the guidelines the way they are. We do have a comment for some decks, but we're just not excluding upper-level decks. Any upper-level deck will come to the board. Whatever the board composition at the time will evaluate its design and appropriateness. So we won't say they're discouraged. We'll see what gets presented. So, all right. So we're back to a vote. We have a first and a second on the motion, and we're not going to make any changes to the text having to deal with decks.
Oh, Mr. Chair, as I was switching over, I realized I forgot to present this to you, but just for your information, on the zoning changes, we're in the supplemental section now. Like, this was updated. Mostly they changed the term setback and yard and how that's used. So just for your information, and this, as a result, was also updated, and the way that open yards are allowed to be drawn has become a little bit more flexible as well. So this diagram has been updated. There was also some changes regarding tree preservation rules, and I'm sure Jaime or Tony has let you know, but the trees on approved plans need to be conditioned and so forth if you would like to see them maintained in the future. And so there's some information about that with the tree guidelines that's been added. And again, just yard and setback wording here. No changes here or here. So I think the rest is all fine. So just so you know, it's due to another ordinance update that we had to revise those little things.
Okay. Is there any more discussion before we call for a vote? Seeing none, I will call for a vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion. One opposed?
And then, Mr. Chair, are you amenable to the subcommittee deciding on the illustrations?
Yes.
Okay, for the basements then. Okay. So, and I just want to clarify then for the second story element, you don't want any changes, or
We're not going to make any changes.
No changes. Okay.
We realized it was a can of worms.
Okay.
We do have something in there about decks and how they should be relating to the neighbors.
Okay. So that was enough. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And then my opposition is only because of the
Uncovered parking.
Uncovered parking, just to make clarification.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying. Okay. Thanks so much for all your input on this. Appreciate it.
All right. We're now on to item 1, which is 325. We apologize, 10 minutes late, but we're now set for the next couple of years with our revised single-family design board. This is 1935 East Las Tunas Road. We've seen this project before. It's a preliminary review. It's a proposal for an as-built stone walls, pedestrian entry gates, driveway gate, new driveway, landscaping. The approval will abate an enforcement case. Have your name for the record?
Amy Blakemore,
Okay.
Dan Sargis.
Okay. If you want to give your presentation.
Where to begin on this?
Well, we've seen this before, so what has happened since the last time we've seen this? Actually, it's time out for a minute. We should have minutes from the previous meeting, and we'll start with reading those minutes. And then you can tell us what you've done.
Do you have those available?
Staff will bring them to us. Are there any staff comments to start off with?
Let me give some staff comments
Okay.
I think are important. Since you last saw this project, staff determined that the front walls that were constructed at the front property line actually encroaching the right-of-way. And they were required, the applicant was required to go pursue an encroachment permit to legalize the location of the walls. And so my understanding is the last time you saw this project, you had favorable comments with respect to the tiering of the walls that were put in front of the property. So we moved forward on that encroachment approval process based on those comments. We are also unsure as to whether there would be a need for a zoning modification, but since it's in the encroachment, Public Works has basically conditioned it if planning is acceptable with the height, that we have instructed the applicant to reduce it to no higher than 42 inches. Some of the locations are barely over 42 inches, unfortunately, and we're asking them to actually lower some of the parts of the walls. That's with respect to the walls. Now, the landscaping is also being reviewed today because there were actually some trees that were installed without approvals, and now they are attempting to resolve that enforcement with a new proposal that would modify their as-built installation. So that's what you're going to hear today about. There are also their landscaping improvements associated with these walls in the front yard.
Okay. So that's where we can begin.
So, this is our,
Well, where's the property line and where's the right-of-way and the walls that are in the encroachment zone? So we can see that area.
wall.
This is the edge of road, the right-of-way. So these walls here,
And this portion here, all the way down.
and all of these walls will be reduced to 42 inches or less.
Right.
Let's turn this direction. Let's put that right there. Okay.
Just the red.
The red
It's overhead power, I think. Is that what that's?
is OH. Okay. Thank you. And then the rest of these walls, there's no change. Is there going to be a gate in this zone?
There is a gate.
There is a gate, okay, and there's the pillars. And your 35-foot setback is here, and so the gates are there. Are these high, tall pilasters? They're short?
I believe they're 42 inches as well, are they not?
No, they're higher. And they've already been approved. This already was done a couple years ago. And they are 20 feet back, and they've been
Okay.
approved already.
So the portions that have not, that are the focus of why we're here then are the walls at the
Right.
street?
The walls are on the street, and the walls going up to the gates. So they have to be within 42 inches, so we have agreed that we will bring them down. If you look at this, there's only a couple spots, and that's where the pedestrian gates are. And they are a few inches over, and we're going to go, they said that we have to take that down here, and we have to take it down here.
Yeah.
And the rest of it, there's going to be, road fill, and then there's going to be stone, and then they will actually be 40 inches or,
Whatever.
yeah.
Once the
So
floors
nothing
and
will
stuff.
be over 42.
So that's the walls.
As far as the landscaping and the driveway, I think the other two issues that are open at this point are the landscaping and the driveway materials. The landscaping, we've been approved for fire. They did remove several trees that had already been installed.
And we will go ahead and remove the other one that Ann Marks has signed off on it.
And then the final issue that I became aware of just recently was the driveway surface materials. We were asked by Tony to make sure we were supplying the Tier 2 best management practices for the driveway surfaces. We're going to be installing a permeable paving system here. This is not the most updated plan that I provided to staff. We're going to do cobblestone pavers here, set in sand.
Can I?
I'm sorry, I don't have a very...
It's going to be chip seal. This will be chip seal. This will be permeable pavers. And then there is a courtyard here. This will be permeable pavers. And then it will be chip seal here. And then on the edges, it will be flagstone. And that's what's there. And I spoke directly with Tony Bauman, and we went in repeatedly, my husband and myself, to make sure that this would be all right. And they suggested that we also put in drains, and the drains also we'll have drains that will go to the west side of the property from the circular area and also from the driveway, and then that will drain onto our property,
Okay.
the west side.
Anything else? This is the same. This is what Ann marks.
This is
Oh,
the irrigation plan.
And that's showing the height elevations by scale of the wells.
Okay. Yeah. We'll just pass the photographs around.
Those plans that I sent over to you, would it be acceptable? for
Many
you
of
to-
these photos, by the way, not all of these photos are taken from high above. They're taken halfway down or three-quarter ways down almost by the street. Where's your photos at, Amy?
Well, I would say just one question having to deal with the photographs. That since these photographs were taken, have some of these trees been removed because fire department
Ann
required it?
Marks requested that we wait until we speak to you, but we are actually having 19 trees removed.
Okay, is that shown somewhere on a plan?
They referred to them. Do you have the original plan here?
Those trees,
Does Tony have them?
the trees that are to be removed are not shown on this plan.
They're already shown as gone.
Correct.
They're already gone. What it was is there were Monterey cypress on the west side of the property, and those are all removed. I believe there was about 8 of them. There are about 3 more that are down on the east side of the property. They were under some oaks, and those will also be removed. There are 2 cypresses that are on by closer to the front of the house, even though they are
Those were
actually
here?
yeah. One of them was 17 feet away. The other one, I believe, was 9 feet away. She requested they both be removed, and we agreed that we would remove them. Also, there, at the front of the property, in the very front of the property, there are 3 cypresses that they're going to be, one of them has to be moved about 3 feet back, so there will be no encroachment. There's a 25-foot limit because of the electrical line there, and they will be also staked. And
Permanent stake?
permanent stake, yeah.
Okay.
So that there will be nothing, well, 25 feet just, they're far enough away from the, I had Con Edison come out. One of them they felt was a little bit closer, so we agreed that we would move it further back 3 feet. So there would be no question. And
So the staking is a concern of the safety of the overhead
because
lines.
if there is any wind or anything like
We'll
that.
ask more
they-
questions during.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to ask more questions later. I'm just.
And I had the fire captain come out, and I had Ann Marks come out, and both of them agreed to this,
Okay.
and they signed off on it.
I think just one last question before the plan. When Ann Marks, the fire person, came to your site, did she also have a plan that she reviewed and marked the plan up, or
Yes.
was it just a verbal thing?
No,
There
it's
was a
marked,
plan.
and she knows it, and she approved of this.
But we don't have a plan today in front of us or here that shows the X's and which ones Ann Marks wants to go away because of her reasons.
No, what you
Okay.
have is a plan that shows the ones that were okay with her to remain.
And that's how she requested that I put it into her.
Okay, so it's the trees that
But
are
I
to
have the
remain.
other one, if you want me to bring it, I can.
We'll see what happens with the rest of the board if they're interested in seeing that information. Okay. I think we understand, and if we don't, we'll always ask more questions. So go back to staff. Are there any staff comments, questions?
I just would like to follow up on, I think we did request that information to be provided, but I think the focus would be on reviewing what the applicant would like to have remained and hearing public comment to see if this landscaping is appropriate for this property.
And also get board's comment on the retaining walls, or we don't have to worry about it
You
anymore?
would move to take action on the retaining walls
Okay.
after, along with associated landscaping.
Thank you. So with that, I'll open up public comment at this time. I have a list. I'll start with Jim Bafili, followed by Philip Suding. You can come on up here to the front. Can you turn the mic on? Thanks.
at a few materials. First of all, my name is Jim Philippi. My wife Colette and I own and live in the home at 2175 West Terrace.
You guys, we have one more for that. Oh, thank you.
So first I'd like to take a little time to just review why we're here today. I think we heard a little bit about the history. There is one approved landscaping plan for this property that was issued in 2007. In 2009, the applicants came before this board, and they proposed to build a two-story home with a 10-12 roof across the ridge line. And I believe at the time Mr. Mann was then chairman of the board, commented during a discussion with the applicant that while nobody had an absolute right to a view, that he'd rather see a design that didn't, and I believe his exact words were, he didn't unnecessarily block the views. The board then voted unanimously against the design and asked the applicant to return to the board with a less intrusive design. They did that very quickly about a month later and presented a different plan with a more balanced design approach. And I just want to note that neither of the uphill neighbors raised any objection with the plan. We understood that there would be some minor interruptions with our view, but we thought it presented a reasonable balance. The board made some comments on the architecture, positive comments, and then the board spent some time reviewing the landscaping plan that went along with that new design. I believe Mr. Carroll spent some time discussing, among other things, certain distances that might, that certain recommended distances between some.
2 minutes.
Okay.
So let's talk about landscaping and retaining walls.
If I could, first of all, I've seen some communications that the applicants had with this board, and among other things, they've suggested that that our home truly never had any harbor views before they took some trees out of their property. I just would ask the board to take a look at this document. And this is a view out of our kitchen window taken in 2004, 3 years before the applicants bought the property. The board just spent some time taking a look at some of the good neighbor guidelines and just recommended that the council consider adopting those. And I'd like to ask the board to look at page 2 of the materials we just sent out of this document. And again, one of the guidelines, one of the tips is now, part of the good neighbor tips is to avoid tall landscaping that interferes with neighbors' views, and to consider the mature plant growth of the height of those plants when selecting the plants. Again, this was just recommended to be codified, but it is currently part of the good neighbor guidelines. So I'd like to now take a look at the next page, and
You can 30 seconds more because I've given you more than 2 minutes. We need to move forward. Thank you.
Would it be possible? I know we have a number of speakers, and several of them I think might be willing to cede some time to me if we could.
I'm giving you a lot of time. Let's just use the time wisely.
All right. Well,
efficiently.
So in taking a look at the plan, you'll just note that this is more of a true as-built plan and shows all the trees that are currently on the property. And these are trees that appeared one Friday afternoon, large box trees without any prior notice, and which never appeared on the 2000 plan or the 2009 plan. And they have since been placed in the locations that are shown on here. And if you look at the red lines on this plan, you can see they reflect the sight lines from one of the two properties above owned by the Patchins. And if you look at the blue lines, those reflect the sight lines from our property. And it's hard to go from plan view to an elevation view, but just so we can do that, you'll see we've marked one tree as a reference tree, and the one that's right at the edge of the traffic circle in the center. And if you turn to the next page, you'll see where that reference tree is protruding up above the roof. The left view is from the Patchins' home, and the right view is from our home. So if you then impose the plan view and look at the distance between the two red lines on the left and the two blue lines on the right, those are the areas where these mature cypress trees have been planted. And in the current condition, there's 16 of those trees planted between straight across the view line on the Patchens property, 13 of those planted across our property. If I could just turn back for one moment to the plan view. As you can see in the circle version, the 3 trees down by the well, the good news is we don't oppose all of this. We don't oppose all of this plan, but we do hope we get a voice in this. And you'll see that there are 3 trees immediately adjacent to the street that Mrs. Sarkis has just indicated will be kept down at 25 feet per fire department approval. The trees that are principally that are in the center of the view line are those that go from that point to the south. And we would certainly, as neighbors, we would certainly not object if in addition to the 3 trees that are located below, the 1 tree adjacent to it would be kept to the 25-foot level. I believe we just heard that the trees within the circle will be removed, so that there's actually 3 trees directly in the middle of the view line that we think are most intrusive. If those were removed, we could support the proposal with leaving all the other trees on both sides and framing the view. Thank you.
Thank you.
His presentation is
Time out.
incorrect.
Time out.
Yeah.
That's one at a time. Phil Suding, and that'll
Good afternoon. My name is Phil Suding, Suding Design Landscape Architects. I'm pretty sure all of you are familiar with what Italian cypress are. Pretty much tall, narrow, highly combustible plant material. In fact, if you've seen them go up in flames, they look like a Roman candle. So they're quite flammable. I think that granted the fire marshal and Ann Marks, the wildland fire specialist, have reviewed the plans. What happened is that they reviewed the plans with the plants in the ground. And it's a little different when you do that and the applicant or the owner has gone to the expense of putting them in the ground. If this were reviewed by the fire department prior to any planting, I can almost 100% sure say that they would not have been approved. It's not a plant that you would plant in a high fire zone. There was a lot of push-pull with the fire department, I think, and that's fine. The fire department needs to work with homeowners, but since this is a new landscape, Italian cypress, I don't feel are appropriate in a high fire area. And regardless of whether or not they were there before the fire department reviewed it, shouldn't really affect your decision. I think it's also fair to ask the applicant to show what is proposed as being removed on the plans. Granted, this is what the ultimate is, but it's very helpful for the city as well as the fire department to have shown on here what is going to be removed. I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Steve Petchen will be next, followed by Nancy Petchen.
Nancy's deferred her time to me. I think it's indicated on the slip.
Well,
So I got 4 minutes.
let's see if you can do 3 and a half.
Oh, okay. First, let me say that we appreciate your hearing this. Again, this is the 3rd time, and I hope the last time that we have to come here. We have attempted, in the spirit of cooperation, which I think Bernie had mentioned at one of the meetings, to get together with our neighbor and try to resolve this. We even suggested intermediaries to meet if they weren't comfortable doing that. They've refused. Absolutely refused to meet with us.
Just, you know what? We're just
Okay, just between us. I don't want to waste your time correcting misstatements that have been made, because plenty of them have been made. And I won't go into it. The plan today, I got to tell you, for over 2 years, we've been living with piecemeal work being done by 1 or 2 laborers. They finally turned the radio off maybe a year and a half ago. But the sawing of rock, it's impossible. It's a constant buzz. There's dust all over our property. It really is not a very good neighbor thing to do. I would like you to ask yourselves, if this plan were submitted to you today for approval, would you in fact approve it? And that's really a key question. I don't know what happened to the good neighbor policy, but we've attempted to communicate and it has not been effective, and that's very disturbing. Living in the Hillside Fire District, as Phil has pointed out, cypress trees are dangerous. When those trees were delivered that day, we called, we emailed, and we sent a letter to the applicant requesting that they don't plant them till we have an opportunity and sit down and talk with them. Nothing happened. There's a claim in a letter of a compromise that they're willing to make. We've never been told of any compromise that any of them are willing to make. If they added a fourth curbside tree to be trimmed to fire department height and moved 3 other trees that are currently in the sight line, we are in agreement. We'll say fine. Just as we did when they came back with a second-story revision that we said was fine. Then they decided not to go ahead with it. And it'll be no annoyance and no monitoring of heights. If that's not acceptable, we, the Philippines and Patchins, are happy to pay for trimming these trees, all the trees, to 25 feet in height on an as-needed basis using a mutually acceptable arborist. And that's my case. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The last speaker is Robert Tulin, maybe? Can't read the last name. T-U-L. Come on up. And you can say your name correctly for the record.
Hopefully I can speak better than I write. My name is Robert or Bob Fulmer. We own property at 1930 Mission Ridge. Our back line is faces with the Sarkises. And I'm not here to comment on the technical details of the argument, but make 3 observations about our neighbors. First of all, we've been lucky to have great neighbors everywhere we've lived, but for the last 10 years in Santa Barbara, we've had the best neighbors we've ever had, and the Sarkises are right at the top of the list from our experience. They've been helpful, they've been friendly, they've been courteous, they've been supportive, and they've done some really nice things in the back part of the property, which is the part we have access to. Secondly, they took a piece of property that was run down and showing signs of age. And in my estimation and opinion, they've done a great job in improving it and making it very attractive. I obviously don't know the details of my friends who have the view issues. But third, I've been impressed just today in hearing the number of compromises and changes they've made to plans in order to try to reflect both the opinion of their neighbors as well as of this group. So I'm here to say that my experience has totally been positive, and I hope that is a factor in whatever deliberations take place.
Thank you. Good. Are there any other public speakers? If not, double check with staff. Anything? Anything else?
We received 6 letters in support of the project. One of them was Mr. Fulmer, who just spoke. If any of you didn't get these, we emailed these to you, but I have them here if you want to look at them. And we also have a letter in opposition from Paula Westbury.
Okay. I'll bring it back to the board to ask questions of the applicant. Yes, Aaron.
What was the design intent of the Melaleuca trees?
I think they're about 20 feet into the property, and they just thought they're nice. And Ann said as long as we kept them at a low, I think 6 feet she recommended. It's on the plan here. And then we trimmed them up, which we already have done.
They're shown at 7.
You need to head closer to this microphone.
Switch on.
I'm on.
That was her. That's
They're
fine.
shown at what?
7 feet wide, and that's a tree that easily gets 20 feet wide.
Trees can be...
So is it a hedge? Are you hedging it, or?
No, it's not a hedge. I said it's about 20 feet away from the property line. So it's not. And the whole property below that is all empty.
So what,
I think the
what was
goal of the
design
Melaleuca
intent?
was to provide some screenage for the neighbors whose home is pretty close to the property line at that part of the property.
Okay. And my other question is there any ground cover plantings?
At this point, we will not be putting anything in.
Nothing
We will
proposed?
Nothing proposed
Okay.
at this point.
All right.
No.
Okay. Gary.
I have some questions, and maybe this is a good time to ask it. A member from the public said that there are more cypress trees than is indicated on the plan.
I don't believe that to be the case. And I see one that's been drawn in here in green. That
Actually,
doesn't
there's one less than that's on this plan because one of them died.
Okay, so on a photograph that the public gate, they are under the impression that there is an addition of it appears to be 4 cypress trees that are not on the as-built drawings.
Where is that at?
They're here.
He's actually asking these
Oh,
right
about
over
those.
here.
Those have been removed.
Those have been removed. Those are underneath some oak canopies. and
that was
they're-
part of
they're
the
all removed.
agreement with
Ann
Ann.
asked that they be removed, and I agreed.
Okay. All right, thanks.
And I don't believe this tree exists.
Yeah,
where it's
that
being
one
shown
doesn't,
here.
yeah,
It's
this
just
one
been drawn
doesn't.
in
Also,
green.
it died, but it's,
Mr. Mahan.
Mr. Chair, I find it difficult. I find this application difficult because it seems to always be a moving target. And we get one thing, and then we get something else, and then we get drawings that are not complete. We get, we're told the walls now are in the right-of-way, but we don't have drawings that show the right-of-way line.
I have
It's
submitted
just,
that.
we,
Time out,
it,
time out.
it, we ask, what is the ground cover going to be? And the answer is, we aren't going to do any ground cover right now. So it seems like this is being a piecemeal, continually being a piecemeal operation, and I find that difficult. I find it difficult for myself as a board member. I think it's difficult for the neighbors. Probably it's really difficult for the applicant too, not to have the plan solidified so that it can be properly priced, etc. So I'm not going to be in the position to approve what we see today. I'd like the applicant to come back with complete, accurate drawings of everything they're proposing to do, and then we can review it and either approve it or not approve it. But I think that the way we're going right now is very dangerous and is inappropriate.
I'll follow up on that, saying that, to say a 2-week continuance to come back with some additional information to review it. Public comment won't be as extensive because we're just continuing where we're leaving off today. And time out, what is missing from us, what we're used to normally seeing, is a plan that shows the trees to be removed and the trees that are to be retained. And then if some trees are going to have a condition like maximum height of 25 feet and other trees can have whatever the natural height is, if that is one of the conditions that's being placed on this, that has to be really easily noticeable. And from that, we'll evaluate the project, and then we can make a decision. Because right now, there's not enough that we can see in front of us to move forward. But we can give you some comments, and we can ask you to come back in 2 weeks, and we'll continue.
Where's the permeable paving? Where's the gravel?
Yeah. So
Those were submitted to staff, but they apparently are not included here.
So what would be good if we all went through quickly and just gave a couple of quick comments and then just say continuance in 2 weeks with additional information being provided. And that's the best way of us moving this project forward, because you want to get approval. The neighbors want to see what's going on, and we need to understand it.
For clarification, if trees have already been removed,
If they're no longer existing today, then they don't have to be shown. It's
That's, I believe, what this is, correct?
well,
Have you taken out all the trees?
No, because they told us to wait.
Oh,
The
they
other
told
ones,
us
I
to
took
wait.
out all of the Monterey cypress and
so
stuff.
let's go and just see if anybody else has any other quick comments to offer, and then we'll wrap this up.
Mr. Chair.
And these two are our landscape architects, so we'll
Okay.
confer to them
Okay,
a lot.
yeah. I've submitted exactly what Ann Marks asked me to do. Now,
Ma'am,
if you want it
ma'am.
differently, I will do it. Yeah. Okay.
What I'm concerned about is all this conversation about topping the cypress to 25 feet. That's an absolutely wrong thing to do, in my opinion. If people feel that has to happen, then that tree's in the wrong place or shouldn't exist there at all. You don't want to be cutting the tops of them off. That's not the right thing to do. So if someone's telling you that that's how it's got to be, I would move these trees somewhere else. Also, it's not often in a landscape naturally that you would see them dotted around like that. They grow together in groups, and they're much more impactful that way. I don't understand why they are in front of the olive trees like that and scattered about the way they are. They form them into groups usually when they're used in a landscape, and they're much better that way. This way, it really does look piecemeal, and it's not attractive.
Could you come to see
Time
her?
out, ma'am. This is their turn.
So I could see from the pictures, there's plenty of photos that show what it looks like from the street, and it doesn't look right. I'm sorry, it just they're not placed correctly, in my opinion.
Thank you very much. Aaron, do you have anything else to add?
I'll just kind of follow up with that comment. I think I'm having issues with the actual design intent of these cypress. They seem to be out of scale with the existing structure. Italian cypress go great with olives and some of these other plants that you have here. I just think maybe the dwarf variety would be more appropriate. And I appreciate your comment about the groupings of them. They're kind of salt and peppered around, and they're hiding the olive tree at the entry. So I would look at how you could either use dwarf trees and also how you group them together.
Okay, thank you. Bernie, do you have any comments? We heard from Gary. Glenn?
Mr. Chair, just some clarifications on, I guess, the survey. I just want to understand exactly some of the height designations that are shown on these walls in the right-of-way. There seems to be top-of-wall indications and a note that says the heights of these walls to be a 42-inch maximum.
There are some locations in which the wall is greater than 42 inches, and they are going to be required to lower it to 42.
But what I don't see is the height of a grade elevation next to the top of wall that really determines whether it's 42 inches tall.
Well, I'll let staff arm wrestle that one, but you're right.
The shade areas show where they exceed 42 inches.
Okay. So I'm going to move this project forward in the sense that we're understanding it, and what we would like to see in 2 weeks is a site plan with X's all over the trees that are being removed, you understand, and then more additional information. And any kind of drainage things that'd be helpful for us, as well as the comments about how the groupings are being handled. And since this is an enforcement case, we'd like to have it come back in 2 weeks. Is that something that you can accomplish in 2 weeks? Okay. So with that, I'm going to ask someone to...
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Also include where the permeable paving is, where the chip seal is, where the right-of-way line is. In other words, what we'd like to see is a complete proposal of what you plan to do.
Is there a second by Bernie? Okay.
Where's all the permanent stuff in it?
So
Tony Bowman had
that's fine. The more information, the better. And it's what we're asking is what you would like to say, and then we get to what you would like to do, and we will comment on it.
I want to understand, do you have the, as far as aesthetically, you're saying you want to have dwarf variety? I mean, I had Eric Nagelman do this design, and he's a very reputable landscape architect. He doesn't find this so objectionable, nor did many of our neighbors.
Okay, we'll have that conversation in 2 weeks. And
Yeah.
okay. So I'll call for a vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? We'll see you in 2 weeks. We're now on to item 2. Apologize for being a little late, but that happens sometimes. It's 1429 Clearview Road. We've seen this project before. It's a proposal for an approximately 100 linear feet of as-built retaining wall and 330 square foot of deck and a spa. Come on up. And we'll have minutes from the previous meeting, and then we'll get some drawings. Mr. Vice Chair, would you like to read that?
The comments from the previous meeting were to number 1, the retaining wall encroachment into the open yard is supportable. Number 2, study the deck layout, its relationship to property lines and privacy issues to the neighboring property. Number 3, consider lowering the deck or providing mature landscaping to provide privacy. Number 4, indicate existing perimeter wall heights on the plans. Number 5, address the understory of the deck above the retaining wall.
Okay. We'll get your name for the record, and then we'll go through these points and ask you how you address them.
Okay. My
Okay.
name is Amy Sachs.
Okay? And you're the property owner?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let's get this just a little closer. Alrighty. Do you have a formal presentation, or should we just go through
No,
this
we'll
list?
just go through them one by one.
Okay, retaining wall encroachment, we were supportive of that. Study the deck layout, its relationship to the property line, and privacy issues with the neighboring property. So was the deck location?
Deck location was cut back on this one side of the property here to be with on both sides. It's within 5 feet of the setback. And I kind of think deck location as well as landscaping are sort of the two things that have to be in common with privacy.
Can you show that one more time?
Yeah.
If this is the 5-foot
Right.
setback
and
line.
the deck is cut back to that 5-foot setback line. Well, it should be.
Let's see if it's on the other plan.
Yeah.
So what you're saying
Yeah.
is this is what the
Yes.
intention was?
Yes.
Okay, and what happened over back here? Where was this?
Mature landscaping, hedge all along this side here.
Okay. Right. So A1. A1. Okay. So the deck was being cut here.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Did you read the minutes from the last meeting? Yes, we did.
Yeah, I wrote
Sorry.
down a few.
It's all right. The board is okay with the retaining wall encroachment into the open yard is supportable by the board. Study the deck layout, its relationship to the property lines, plural, and privacy issues with the neighboring property. So the deck was pulled back here, and on the back there's no change to the deck because of the existing hedge in place?
There's a hedge that has grown in. There's a privacy fence, and then 5 feet behind that so that it's within the setback.
Item 3 was consider lowering the deck or provide mature landscaping to provide privacy.
All the way around.
Okay, so you decided...
And I have more current photographs if that helps for people to get a better picture of how that landscaping has grown in to provide a hedge.
So the first thing is you decide not to lower the deck, and so you're putting...
Because it said or.
Correct. So then what landscaping will be planted here?
It is right along here, a hedge.
Do you have like a name for it? Because I'm not
Yes,
a hedge kind of
privet.
guy. Privet.
Which is already at 7 feet, so that we keep trimmed at 8. All the way around, completely from here to here to here. Actually, there's some old privet growing behind us that are much more mature and larger, but
Okay. Go on to the next one. Indicate the existing perimeter wall heights on the plans. Was that done?
the wall heights, let's see.
6 foot high, wood fence, not part
It's
of...
5 foot high.
I'm sorry, existing 5 foot.
Uh-huh. And then wall heights, 42 inches here, at its highest point.
Is there anything along here for this height of the hedge?
There is a privacy fence also along here, 5 foot high. And that was already existing, that fence.
Okay. Moving on. Address the understory of the deck above the retaining wall. So you added lattice because in the previous proposal there wasn't lattice?
There was lattice, but you didn't see it, and I pointed it out. So that has been on there, but
It's off of Valerio Street. I'm not positive. Isn't this
it's a.
Mitchell-Chelina?
I'm not on the Mesa.
No, backside. That's a question we'll ask staff when we get there. Okay. So I think we understand your proposal and the photographs. So do you have anything else to add? Okay. I'll go to public comment. Is there any public comment on this item? If not, I'll go to staff. Are there any staff comments?
No staff comments. We do have a letter in opposition from Paula Westfield.
One question from the board was whether or not this was high fire. Do you have a way of looking that up, just on the off chance?
No, it is not.
It is not. Okay, cool. I'll bring it back to the board for questions of the applicant.
Mr. Chair. Is this drawing, I mean, you drew a line in here at 5 feet. Is this, does that mean that this will, that looks, this is quarter scale. So it looks like this would have to be
modified.
Okay, that's my question.
Okay. Questions? I guess I have a question for the landscape people. I don't know what a privet hedge is. Is that an appropriate visual screen barrier? And then there's an existing hedge here which is sufficient, or do we need to know what kind of spacing it is just for documentation's sake?
Do you know what it is?
It's what was said, but there's nothing shown on the drawings as an indication.
Oh. For really tight screening to get rid of
3 feet? Yeah.
Okay. Go back. Now, this project requires compliance with a staff hearing officer resolution. Do we have that, Tony? Did you already give that to me? It is not in the high fire.
I had 2 letters from my neighbors on either side that were for it. If that, copies of them, I have the originals here if you need to see them.
Well, we'll just have the record show that we have 2 letters in support of the project from adjacent neighbors. And we'll add that to our public comment portion.
The spa equipment, is that underneath the deck?
No, the spa equipment is actually right here. It's shown right here. And there's a little hedge around that too of the privet that keeps it hidden.
Okay. Tony's getting the staff hearing officer stuff. Yes.
Did I understand you correctly that you reduced the size a little bit?
Of the
And
deck.
can you point out where that occurred?
Let me just look forward.
Oh, toward the
Yeah, it would
neighbors?
be on the side of the neighbor.
So you moved it in? Or at least you're,
Within the
you're
setback.
going to move it in?
Within the setback.
Going to move it
Yes.
in if we...
Yes.
Okay, and you've got 2 letters from the neighbors on either side of you?
On these 2 sides.
And they are
In favor.
okay with the design there? So just to... May I just
You may continue.
I just want... So what will the actual size be when we have the 5 feet taken away?
Well, it says 330
Yeah.
originally, so it would probably bring it down by maybe another 3 times 10, maybe another 25 feet, so 300-foot deck.
Thank you.
Now, we can't make a motion yet because one of the staff members is getting the staff hearing officer resolution, so we have a little dead air time.
Okay.
So I think we should ask you about the bolt spacing.
Like, woo!
The bolt spacing on the deck, it's very important. Never mind, okay. Not our purview. Does anybody have anything else? And we'll just... Was there anything there, Tony?
Yeah, I just got the staff hearing officer resolution. There were no conditions of approval on the modification approval.
So we can take action on this preliminary, and I would recommend final on consent with some additional documentation. And if it's all right, I'll float a motion that's basically the preliminary approval of the project as presented with the following notes: that the drawings need to be updated to show the reduction of the deck along the side property line. The drawings need to be updated to show the change in the north elevation. The drawings need to show the spacing of the hedge along the south property line, which is the privet hedge. And the drawings need to show the actual deck square footage, because if you reduce the deck, the square footage size reduces. So that's a motion that I'm floating. Is there someone that can support that? First by Denise. Second by Aaron. Is there any other additional comments? Okay, and this is going to be preliminary approval with final on consent. So all these kinds of things will be addressed at another meeting.
Okay. Sure. We need
Time out. We'll go here.
we need NPO findings.
NPO findings. Denise? We need to make NPO findings on this issue.
Yes, I'd like to find approval based on the size, bulk, and scale, and compatibility with the neighborhood and the quality of materials used.
Perfect.
This is also a nice before and after shot. If people who are curious about what landscape looks like when given a couple years to grow in.
Wow. Great. And with that, we'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. And there's a 10-day appeal period.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm all done?
You're all done.
For now.
Touch base with staff about updating the drawings and getting it back to them.
Thank you.
Perfect. And before we go on to you guys, we got a little bit of clerical stuff to take care of. Mr. Baumann?
Yes.
We need to go back to the consent calendar for today.
Right. We can announce again that 960 West Mountain Drive was heard earlier today on consent. It was scheduled on the full board agenda by mistake. So we were going to ratify that item along with the rest of the consent calendar from this morning. Now.
Good. So do we have...
We were concerned with public hearing.
Is
That
it-
you would call a public hearing first.
Is there anybody here to speak on 960 West Mountain Drive? Seeing nobody, I'll close public hearing.
Mr. Chair, we found the final drawings, the landscape plan, to be appropriate to the comments that the full board had sent to the consent calendar. We did pick a final color for you remember that the walls were proposed to be a fairly dark stucco. The applicant brought in a huge sample of what he wanted to do, and since we didn't want to keep that, we picked a paint color that was pretty close to it, and so we found that to be acceptable. But we were concerned that there would be public comment. Because it was agended for our regular agenda, we wanted you to open and close the public comment first.
Okay. So with that, I'll call for a motion for approving the consent calendar for today, April 12th.
I'll make that motion.
First by Mr. Mahan, second by...
I should read the whole consent calendar into the record, though.
Oh, okay, I'm
because
sorry.
there were other items also. Okay. All right, this is consent calendar for today, April 12th. We have item A, 306 Sherman Road, got final approval with a condition. Item B, 3515 Madrona Drive, a review after final was approved as submitted. Item C, 3240 Braemar Drive, got final approval with a condition. Item D, 32 Rosemary Lane was postponed 1 week. Item E, 929 Isleta Avenue, got final approval with conditions. Item F, 3308 Calle Fresno, got a preliminary approval with conditions. And as we mentioned, 960 West Mountain Drive got a final approval with condition. And consent today was reviewed by Bill Mahan and Denise Woolery.
Great. And we have a first by Mr. Mahan, a second by Mr. Mosel. Any other discussion? I'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're now on to item 4, which is 1750 Sycamore Canyon Road. Gary stepping down. We're about 10 minutes ahead of schedule. So thank you for being early, like really early. This is a new item, so I will read the project description. This project is for phases 4 and 5 of the Sycamore Canyon Emergency Landslide Repair Project. The proposal to construct a modular block retaining wall and other repair and drainage structures which cross the city-county boundary. Approximately 105 linear feet of retaining wall is located within the city, along with 8,600 cubic yards of cut and 6,600 cubic yards of fill. Maximum height of the wall is approximately 7 feet. The area of repair will be revegetated. If I have your name for the record and your presentation.
Sure. For the record, my name is Steve Welton from Suzanne Elledge Planning and Permitting Services.
Okay.
And I'm David Schreier with Cotton Shires and Associates. We're the geotechnical engineers and the designers.
So I'll give a brief overview of why we're here, and then I'll hand it over to David to explain the project.
Can we first have like a general site plan just so people can...
Sure.
Here's
an aerial, actually. Sorry about the small size of it, but the landslide repair foundation has been tasked with repairing the landslide that occurred in 2005, the most recent landslide that occurred in 2005-2006. They received a settlement from Caltrans to repair and hopefully prevent future landslides along Sycamore Canyon Road in this particular area. The landslide was selfish enough to ignore jurisdictional boundaries, so it went across both the city and county jurisdictions, and so we're working cooperatively with both the county of Santa Barbara and the city, and with Caltrans to implement 7 different phases. I've got a handout here if you're interested in the different phases that are occurring. We've accomplished 3 of the phases already. We're working on the 4th right now. These are the 5th and 6th phases, although they're numbered differently than that. And there's a future phase as well. I met with Tony Spann, who's the chair of the Montecito Board of Architectural Review, discussed it with him on the phone and provided him copies of the drawings, because this does also fall in the county within the jurisdiction of the MBAR. And it was his determination that he would waive the MBAR's review, knowing that your board was going to be reviewing the project. The repair crosses also, the yellow line here indicates the jurisdictional boundary, and I'll let David go into the details of the wall itself, which is the reason why we're here. It's a retaining wall. I've got some photographs which I've submitted earlier, which show the general location, if you're familiar with it, where the slide is. This is where the Sycamore Canyon terminates right now. You can't drive past this area. The wall would be located on the right-hand side as you come in from the roundabout. And we propose to do a block wall similar to what's on the top of the slope right now. Here's some of the photographs just to give you an idea of what we're talking about.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I'll let David go ahead and, unless you have questions about the background, go ahead and explain why we're here today.
Okay.
As part of the mitigation of the landslide, we trying to follow the recommendations of the California Building Code, which indicate that a V-ditch/drainage swale should be provided every 30 vertical feet, which mandates that we need to have a V-ditch on the slope. And in order to put one in, a wall was the logical measure to do this, because it is going to be a fairly steep slope when completed. We considered various options, and our client, the Landslide Repair Foundation, recommended we go with a modular block wall, like you see photos, to be consistent with other walls in the neighborhood. The wall will be part of Phase 5. It'll have a maximum height of about 7 feet. It'll have a return at the southern end, and it'll taper down at the southern end.
Which is the southern end? What do you mean by return?
So it starts. Now there's a little bend right here, and we've done a visual rendering of this with a computer program showing a possible landscaping idea. The landscaping can be figured out at a later phase. The plan is to landscape the slope during Phase 7 once all the construction is done. We've kind of visually thrown out an idea of putting some vines, but that's not been fixed yet.
Just to clarify on that, we're in an emergency project at this point, so we've been moving with the county and city with emergency permits for each phase. So it's our goal, our hope that today that you will allow us to approve the wall with the knowledge that Phase 7 addresses the landscaping, and that we would return prior to issuance of the final building permit for this wall to address landscaping for the whole project. Which is Phase 7, addresses landscaping for the whole project. So we'd return prior to final sign off of that wall to show you the landscaping for this particular area.
Okay.
On, I think sheet C14, there's an elevation view.
There it is.
So while it's shown as maximum wall height of about 7.33 feet, there will actually be about 1.5 to 2 feet that'll be below grade, so it'll be less than what's shown.
Okay.
This has a V drain behind it.
That's correct, a V ditch with a drop inlet.
Okay. I think we understand it. And this is the only wall for
the only above grade wall. It's this one right here. This is a underground subdrain. This structure here will be completely below ground. It'll be several feet below ground, so you won't see that.
Okay. Great. Do you have anything else to present? Good. I'll open up public comment. Is there any public comment on this item? Go to staff.
We do have a public comment letter in opposition from Paula Westbury.
Okay. Going back to the board to ask questions. Does someone have a question? I have one off the top of my head. The V ditch that's on the back side, is it concrete or is it going to be an earth?
It'll be a concrete V ditch.
And then is it colored concrete or is it regular gray, standard gray?
At this time, it'd be standard gray.
What have you done on the other projects?
Standard gray.
Standard gray.
My experience is you won't be able to see the V ditch unless you're standing right on top of the wall.
Okay. Thank you. Questions from the board?
Question? I have a comment.
No. Yes.
I have probably a stupid question.
No.
Out of my realm a lot, but I know you've done a lot of engineering studies and soil reports and all that, but is the water, or was this coming from the top of the hill? Is there any issue with the houses on the top of the hill? Or can you talk about that solution that you have?
Surface runoff or sub-ground water? Yeah, okay, so as part of this phase and other phases, we've installed horizontal drains going upwards of 350 feet into the slope to try and reduce the buildup of groundwater in the slope. And then we also have various vertical drains that, let me go back to this.
Okay, now that's okay.
Okay.
I understand it better now. Thank you.
And then there are also several different V ditches going up the slope as well.
Okay, we'll go to comments.
Mr. Chair, just one quick question, clarification. From the photographs that I see here, it doesn't look like it, but are there any trees that are impacted by this wall?
No, there are none.
Okay. So we'll go to comments. Mr. Mahan?
Yeah, I think that the V ditch may be visible from the houses that sit up on.
Ranchito Vista.
Yeah, up on all of those little side streets that come off of Las Alturas and look down on this. In fact, when we were doing our T-Fire site visits, I remember looking down on this particular this great slide area, and there were some comments about that the state had given a settlement to these people and that they were hiring their own engineers to do it. So I think that my feeling would be that the V ditch should be the same color as this tan concrete block, and I think that would be more appropriate.
Thank you for that. Comments from anybody else?
I guess a question back. Is there any way to jog the wall a little bit? Is this stuff on a? Is it veneered onto a?
It's not a veneer. These are 8-inch high by 18-inch wide by 21-inch deep blocks, and they fit together with mechanical pin connections, and so you can curve them, you can batter them back, which we were going to do. You can do gentle curves, but you can't do. No, because that builds up stresses too much at that angle.
I'll follow up on that question because I saw this and saw this was nice. This doesn't have a dying back into the hillsides.
Mm-hmm.
What is the reason why this wasn't mirrored?
The reason the northern end was because we have to conform to the ground surface, and we want to taper it to as small a wall as we can. But we have this row of shear pins there to protect the resident's house during grading, so we weren't able to do a smooth curve there, so we did a tight curve. But there's no reason we couldn't do the same at the southern end. If that.
Did you catch this? If you'd like to look at the... Yeah. So we can actually repeat the curve, this tight curve at one end, and die this back into the hillside on the opposite end. It has a catch basin here in the middle, so it probably goes down this direction.
Exactly.
Will that affect when that?
No. But thank you for pointing that out. So the V ditch starts back here.
So then that.
So we couldn't dive that.
So let's look at the height of that wall at that point. So it basically flushes out to zero. Yeah. Okay, never mind. Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious about this particular photo. This comes after what you're proposing here. It's phase, looks like the last phase. And what is that exactly?
So that's the wall that's going to be buried.
Oh, I see.
You won't see that.
Okay, so that's all underground, and then you put these walls.
Exactly.
And probably this whole slope that's been disturbed by the slide will be re-landscaped or revegetated.
That's the plan in Phase 7.
And if I may continue, so basically this one of these walls then ends up at the top of this?
Correct. There'll be a
follow
V
the
ditch
top?
at the top of that.
Okay, I see.
And again, trying to comply with the CBC recommendations of every 30 vertical to have a V ditch.
And that phase, that's actually the phase that we're doing right now. You're looking at that slide.
Any other comments or questions? Do we have a motion from the board?
Mr. Chair?
Bernie.
I just would like to discuss with our board color a teeny little bit more. If you look at the landscaping, it's going to be filled in eventually with all green landscaping. So I was wondering if we want to try to avoid the contrast and maybe make that wall more of a greenish tone, and how the board felt about that.
Does someone want to jump in?
Well, Mr. Chair, I don't think that concrete block comes in green color. It's just unless we wanted to have it.
I guess I don't have a problem with it because it's kind of like a stone outcropping, kind of like in the Riviera area.
Mr. Chair, my concern is approving this without a landscape plan to look at prior. I mean, it's a very long wall.
We will have a landscape plan.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a semi-guarantee. It's not like they're not going to get away with not doing one.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I mean, I think that's a good comment, but I think really this, which part is in the city of Santa Barbara? See, this is really our purview. And this is an emergency issue. So I think it would be good to see the landscape, but I think we ought to let this go ahead and let them do it and get it in the ground.
And I guess with that, the sooner you can get us a landscape plan just on paper for comments, the better, because then you'll have it finished. Okay. So with that, float a motion for preliminary and final for the project as seen, for the part that's within the city of Santa Barbara, with comments for the part that's in the county, that the concrete swale on the backside of the wall shall be an integral colored concrete to match the tan block wall material, and that the applicant to bring back a complete landscape plan as soon as possible.
Okay.
Is there someone who would first that motion? Bernie, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any other additional comments to that motion?
Mr. Chair, maybe I should ask this earlier. There's going to be a whole irrigation system brought in for the landscaping, and
Presumably, I'm not a landscaper, but I would anticipate that that would be the case.
Probably a temporary one, and they'll answer it.
We were just both saying the same thing.
No, never mind. You'll tell us. So with that, we'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chair, was that a preliminary approval with a landscape plan to return to consent?
It can read. I should ask, is it all right if it went straight to?
Yeah, that's okay.
The maker of the motion?
It's okay.
Do you want to see landscaping?
We're just talking about landscaping the wall. We're not talking about landscaping the whole slope of this one.
Well, this whole area is going to be landscaped, and I don't think I really need to see it, but you guys need to see it. And if you want our input, then we're more than willing to spend the time.
Are you prepared to do a landscape plan for the whole slope of this in the near future?
At some point,
in
you
the
will.
near future, for sure.
Yeah.
There's money earmarked for that, and
I think we can look at that on consent.
Okay, so landscape.
Do you need a final approval today?
In order to get the building permit issued.
Can we do a final approval of the wall?
We gave
with
it.
landscaping?
I'm giving it, or the motion was basically upon their phase schedule. We have a guarantee that landscaping will come during phase 7 because.
So you could do a final approval of the wall with a condition that landscaping return later to
That's what
consent.
I'm suggesting.
Yes, and that's what we'll do. So Bernie, we need to go back and modify the motion we all voted on, and that is preliminary and final with landscaping to return to consent.
And when it returns to consent, just to make sure that one of the landscape, or both of the landscaping people are available to review.
Yeah, and the landscaping would include irrigation methods. Okay, and based upon the vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. There's a 10-day
NPO finding.
NPO fine.
That it's compatible with the neighborhood and the quality of materials are appropriate to the site.
And a 10-day appeal period will be announced.
Thank
you very much. So we're going to take a quick 5-minute recess, and we'll return at 10 minutes to 5.
I fly all around the city. World's my sweet potato pie. I'm sitting mighty pretty. Sweep up the stars, chase that old moon. Fall into bed, humming a tune. It's crazy, but I'm in love. I spread my wings and then I fly all around the city. World's my sweet potato pie. I'm sitting mighty pretty. I sweep up the stars, chase that old moon, fall into bed, humming a a tune. It's crazy, but I'm in love. It's really crazy, but I'm in love.
I wish I knew someone like you could love me. I wish I knew you placed no one above me. Did I mistake this for a real romance? I wish I knew, but only you can answer. If you don't care, why let me hope and pray so? Don't lead me on. If I'm a fool, just say so. Should I keep dreaming on, or just forget you? What shall I do? I wish I knew. If you don't care, why let me hope and pray so? Don't lead me on. If I'm a fool, just say so. Should I keep dreaming on, or just forget you? What shall I do? I wish I
Just put the spot that system for you guys. Probably better put this in.
Everybody loves a baby, that's why I'm in love with you. Pretty baby, pretty baby. And I'd like to be your sister, brother, dad, and mother too. Pretty baby, pretty baby. Won't you come and let me rock you in my cradle of love? And we'll cuddle all the time. Oh, I want a loving baby, and it might as well be you. Pretty baby of mine. Everybody loves a baby, that's why I'm in love with you. Pretty baby, pretty pretty baby. And I'd like to be your sister, brother, dad, and mother too. Pretty baby, pretty baby. Won't you come and let me rock you in my cradle of love? And we'll cuddle all the time. Oh, I wanna love and baby, and it might as well be you. Pretty baby, oh, pretty baby, oh, pretty baby of mine.
Think of what you're losing by constantly refusing to dance with.
Oh, we can. We're going to resume Single Family Design Board for April 12th. We are on item 5, which is 1111 San Andreas Street. It was supposed to start at 5:05, and it is now like 7 minutes to 5, so we're a little early. This is the first time we've heard this project, so I will read through the project description. This is a proposal to construct 733 square foot two-story addition, a second entrance and driveway from Carrillo Street, a 426 square foot carport, and a 352 square foot covered patio on the first floor, and a 147 square foot covered deck on the second floor. The existing 859 square foot one-story single-family residence is located on an 8,875 square foot lot. The proposed total of 2,400 square feet is 71% of the maximum guideline FAR, floor area ratio. If I have your name for the record, and then we'll have a presentation.
Thank you. My name is Jerome White.
Okay. You want to start with some pictures?
Yeah.
I'm going to keep this picture here in the center. The TV camera will zoom in, and we'll put more on top of it, and we'll build off of that.
Right. This is the photo of the existing single-family residence that Mr. and Mrs. Ortega live in at 1111 San Andreas Street. This house is directly to their left, off this way. This photograph shows the house a little bit left of the existing residence, and this is the house directly to the right, facing the proposed addition.
Okay.
There's some other photos that you have that show similar structures across the street.
This is the neighborhood setting?
Right, neighborhood setting photographs. One of the photos that I think is interesting, this is a pretty good photograph. It shows the rear of the parcel taken, this photo was taken from Carrillo Street, and it shows the existing single-family residence, and it shows the adjacent two-story duplex at the back of the adjacent property.
That's this neighbor's backyard?
Other one,
Oops.
the one to the left. Let's see, I think it's the bottom photo there. Yep.
There we go.
There, you see that. So that photograph is the back of this two-story addition.
Okay.
One other photo, and I've not seen it, this is a capacity that the city, the capability of taking a Google photo from above the street. I'd not seen this, and one of your planners had said, oh yeah, you can go to Google and get an aerial shot. I'd never had known that that was a possibility. It's amazing. And there again, you could see the two-story addition on the neighboring parcel. You could see the existing Ortega single family there.
Okay.
The initial design was done by Preston Mann, a contractor who was hired to do the addition, and then Preston asked if I could sort of do some of the drawings, which I agreed to do. Preston's intent is to try to get the addition to basically leave the front of the house as is, use the rear of the first floor as a stairwell to get up to the second story addition, and upstairs would be basically a master bedroom is all it is, with an exterior exit access back down. One of the requirements is that we need to add additional parking, and so they're proposing a two-car covered carport. I realized earlier discussions about the neighborhood preservation ordinance, there was some discussion regarding carports. the parcels off to the right, many of them have flat roofs, and I would hope that your board would at least consider that a flat roof might be appropriate, given it's not visible from San Andreas Street, or very much really from Carrillo. You really don't get much of a view of this parcel. Not much else to say. I guess I'll just sum up by mentioning that we think that it's in the same color and materials, etc., as the existing single-family residence viewed here from the street. And I'm here to answer any questions and take comments.
Okay, let's just go through the drawings. This.
As you said, I'm here for, I believe it's conceptual, Tony, is that correct?
Yeah, well, it's comments only because we haven't completed the environmental assessment.
Okay. That faces the carport.
That would be the carport elevation with the carport, looking through the carport, basically. You can't see that. That's the rear.
Typically, I think we call this the west elevation. This is the east. This facing San Andreas Street would be the east. We think of San Andreas Street as running north and south.
Okay, it confuses me sometimes because it's at a 45-degree bias, and I'm never quite sure.
We have west side and east side. This is the west side. Well, this would be actually the south elevation. This would be the north elevation.
Okay. Good. Thank you very much. I will open up public comment. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing nobody behind you, I'll go to staff. Are there any letters?
We do have one letter in opposition from Paula Westbury.
Okay. With that, we'll return to the board for questions of the applicant.
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So this is not being proposed as a duplex.
No, that's correct. No. Is this my copy?
You can review that later at another time. Is the zoning here R2?
Yes. Yeah, the owners are aware that they, in fact, could have a duplex. They choose instead to simply have a second-story master bedroom. They don't want a duplex.
Mr. Chair, I have some...
Gary.
The connection to the house is the staircase. Is that what the connection is? From the lower floor, the interior staircase to the upstairs, that's the connection. What about the connection to the... This vestibule is clear. Is that this is open?
Yeah, open.
And the existing garage is planned to stay?
Correct.
And you're adding another car spot?
Yes,
Two
it's
spots?
required. Initially, we were told that we didn't need to add additional parking, but later we were told that, in fact, because of the square footage, there was, as I recall, a trigger by which, because the addition exceeded a certain number, that it triggered, and staff can help on this perhaps, that triggered the requirement for additional two-car covered parking.
This is just a single car garage.
Correct, and that will stay as such. It will remain a single garage, and the addition basically is over it, the second-story addition.
Bernie.
Can you elaborate a little bit? I'm thinking about how busy Carrillo Street is and how that there's going to be a driveway coming off of Carrillo Street.
It's currently there now. Actually, I think
And it's used?
it's used by two neighbors. That's a pretty good photo. There's one that shows yeah, that's a good one as well. Yeah, both the Ortega's parcel as well as the parcel adjacent use this existing cut. It's kind of on the corner. It's not actually on Carrillo. It kind of occupies the corner. Well, I guess it is. Yeah, this is Carrillo here. This
is the alley coming through.
Yeah. Interestingly, it was reviewed and I guess previously approved by the Transportation Department. One of staff's first concerns was, is this a legitimate access and when was it created? And it came back from Transportation that it had been approved some time ago. I don't know the history.
Well, what is this dash line here? What does that represent?
Oh, just simply blowing up that area into this area. I didn't want to include the full driveway, so this is just kind of a blow up of that area. The staff wanted to see a floor plan, and I thought that would be a good way to show it.
I have a question having to do about the plate heights that you have here. Are you saving the original structure and building on top of it, or are you going to be demolishing and rebuilding this?
From a practical standpoint, it'll be a demolished and rebuild. I don't believe that the footings are going to be able to take a second-story load. From a practical standpoint, I've not talked with the contractor, but I suspect that we will be putting in. I don't know the quality and the extent of reinforcing in the footings.
I would concur with your analysis that it would be a demo rebuild. The portion that's in the side yard setback currently has to be rebuilt 100% exactly the way it is. So if this is a 7'1" plate or 6'9", it is what it is, or you get a mod to make it whatever it is. The question I have to do is the height of the overall garage and whether or not it's a typical 7-foot garage door, if it's being proposed to be taller than 7 foot, and the 9-foot plate. Because if this is going to be the original height, because usually the old garages back in the olden days are like 7.5, maybe 8 feet tall. So do you have any strong knowledge of what the existing condition of this garage is?
My knowledge, as far as I understand, Mr. Chair, that the plate height is 8 feet.
Okay.
But I'm making a note that if in fact it's less than that, we're stuck with it, as I understand your...
And that's what I'm saying, commenting about the garage. And then the addition, you have a 9-foot plate?
Yes.
And any particular reason why this has an extra 1-foot volume?
No, I don't recall what Preston was thinking. I think he just wanted to get a little bit more, he didn't want this to be too squashed, perhaps.
Okay.
That may have been his intent, is to get as much wall area above those openings, perhaps, and not feel too cramped.
Okay. So let's move to comments and...
I actually had a question.
Oh, another question.
How are you handling drainage, and how much... Have you done calculations on how much more impermeable surfaces you're adding and how you're handling the drainage?
No, but that's a good point. I mean, I would encourage at some point when we start doing the working drawings to go with surfaces that are permeable and will allow the water back into the groundwater basin. I know that one of the staff comments was that we need to go through a, and you'll have to pardon me, it had to do with rainwater, not so much rainwater runoff, but flood control in that area. Pardon? Yes. And so that's one of our concerns. And another was a recent letter from your staff requesting an archaeological examination of, what's occurred on the site. So there's a few hurdles to go through, but I'll make a note of your concern. I would agree that we'd want to get as little hard surface as possible, especially with that road off Carrillo. Yeah, the roofs, we could certainly try to direct it to a catchment system, but I'm certain that the applicant would be interested in doing a gravel-type driveway.
Do we, question to staff, do we have to, in R2 zone, do we have the open yard requirement?
Yeah.
And is that that's right there, huh?
Mm-hmm.
1,265, okay.
So I'll go to comments from the board. Well, if no one has comments, I'll jump first. Just my first comment was having to deal with the garage and addressing that, and making sure that this complies with what your ordinance are. And if you need the 9-foot plate, the concern I have is shown in the side elevation. This is the property. This is the garage next to the property line, and this is that kind of semi-squashed elevation. When this grows in height, that makes this look kind of funky. So by bringing this down a foot, this makes this nest a little nicer. Even though this elevation looks nice, this one looks a little bit on the large side. So visually, I have some concerns about it being a little on the strong side with this being so diminutive. And it's just a concern right now visually. Comments from board members?
Mr. Chair?
Gary.
I will start with some comments. I find the plan a bit odd. One thing I find a bit odd is the gables, the multiple gables, and how they incorporate. It almost appears that there are more gables than the elevation, than the floor plan shows. So a roof plan would be helpful to understand that. Secondly, the idea that the exterior staircase going down on the outside of the building that is facing Carrillo Street, I don't think is a positive attribute to this plan, and it, especially being doubled up, that there's a staircase on each side of the building. I don't think that's a favorable design. Additionally, there's the use of arches in the building that I don't think are compatible with the architecture of the building itself. I find them to be a misused design. The carport with the storage in the back and additional storage at the existing garage and the flat roof and plastered at one end and poles with diagonal braces on the front end of it, I find it to be disjointed as well. I'm going to leave those the basic comments for now. That'll be my comment. I do have some issues about the cantilevers as well, but leave that as that. Thanks.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Glenn?
I would agree with both Paul's and Gary's comments. Paul's regarding the plate heights and Gary's comments regarding multiple design issues. Kind of to add to that list, this particular gable and post position seems a little peculiar. I think maybe the roof being turned 90 degrees there may help soften that elevation and make it more appropriate feeling. The carport also I don't find as an acceptable design to be compatible with the house. I would encourage also the roof plan to be studied. There's some unclarity from elevations to plans, and that's primarily it.
Yes, Mr. Mayhem.
Yeah, I agree with those comments. I think it's really important to recognize this bungalow quality that is that's there with the very charming windows and simple clever use of a gable and then a hip, and I think that would this roof could be, and all of these gables, the house of 7 gables, could be softened by for instance, on this back side here, solving this problem here almost with a hip. And so that you play you play off on this existing architecture by repeating the hip and the gable in a clever way, and that typically I think if a house of this character had an arcade, it would be done with posts that might have a filigree or something. It would tend more toward although it's a stucco, I think it would tend toward the carpenter style, because it's a bungalow style and I think we want to try to hang on to that character, and consequently the very high gables might be better off to be hips. And you wouldn't have that big gable up there. So I think that while I don't have a problem with the general configuration of adding a master bedroom and family room upstairs and a porch here that people can sit under to look at out on the yard, I think that the architecture needs to be studied further and bring it more into compatibility with the existing house.
Mm-hmm. That's a good comment. I'll just give you a little back history.
Actually,
you have, okay.
Yeah.
Finish your comments.
Mr. Chair, I agree with the comments.
Good. Anything new to add?
The drainage is important.
Okay, we'll catch that. Bernie?
I pretty much agree with all the comments. One thing we haven't discussed, and it's probably a non-issue, but just want to confirm with the board that we feel that the size of the second story at 733 square feet, and along with the balcony and the covered deck and everything, is a size that's compatible.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, I might add that when we come to a solution that the board can support, that the balcony and the loggia and the porch here are very, very important aspects of this design, and because they're in the mass will be mitigated by those being open. And I think we want to be on record that if those are ever wanted to be closed in, that would dramatically change the size, bulk, and scale. Mm-hmm. And the applicant should know that might not be something that would ever be approved.
Okay. Well, I think you got some good feedback.
I do have one quick question. The reason that we had gone initially to these kinds of details was that they were wanting to keep the existing front of the house as it is and do the rest of the house in more of a Spanish style. And I said, I don't think that'll be very well received. That you'll be trying to tack on a style onto a house that's, I said, I wouldn't suggest that approach. And so we backed off of that, but I think your your design board has pointed up a few very good suggestions that there's some carryover from the earlier approach. These arches, as were pointed out, some of the detailing could be improved on. So I appreciate your comments, and we'll come back with a revised plan.
Great. We'll formulate a motion and make it an indefinite continuance. So does someone want to craft a motion? Shall I craft one and you guys just listen on? Okay. All right. The first one would be the board. The board would like the applicant to return with some additional information pertaining to the paving and the drainage on the site. The board would like the applicant to consider the design of the carport and how it relates to the architecture of the proposed house. Applicant is to provide documentation of the existing single-car garage that's to be demolished and rebuilt, and to study the north property line elevation and the plate height of the second floor as it relates to the garage roof. South. I was looking at you and you did not. The south elevation. Applicant to bring a roof plan. The board would like to see a possible incorporation of hips relating to the existing one-story architecture.
Mr. Chair, I'll make that motion, adding that we would like the new architecture to be compatible with the bungalow style of the existing house, which we find charming, and that we want to point out, and the architect should take back to the owner that we have a very specific guideline that an addition will be compatible with and follow the architectural style of the existing house. But I'll make that motion the way you crafted it.
Thank you. Is there a second for that? Second. Under a comment, I just happened to notice that I think there's a chimney right here in the existing house.
Yes.
So then you can show that here, and that's always a drag when you get to do your roof plan. So.
Good. Yeah, it used to be.
It still is, but that's just something you can catch now or catch later.
Could I just clarify? So this is now you refer to this elevation not as the north elevation, but
that's the east side.
This is now. I'll relabel these as east, basically facing Carrillo. Okay.
East side.
Great.
We have
State Street, the east side of State Street, the west side of State Street, and whatever you think.
We have Bernie and then Gary. You had a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask the maker of the motion if they would add something about studying the exterior staircase to ensure that it meets our guidelines and it is compatible with the neighborhood. And then also the covered deck, that's something I would like a little bit more information about as well.
The covered deck or the one that's underneath the loggia?
The covered deck, the 147 square foot covered deck on the second floor.
That's like a balcony, a wraparound.
I just would like to see what they're proposing.
Okay. Did you have any comments?
I did.
Okay,
And
Gary.
Under discussion, I was wondering if the motion maker would mind adding, as Bernie said, the exterior staircase and the proposed carport. There was a few board members that were feeling that it was incompatible.
There was a comment about having the carport's architecture match the proposed structure.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how it was worded.
And I think that your comment about the exterior staircase is, I think it's appropriate, but I don't think that the board should summarily say you can't have an outside staircase. So let's. I mean, this is an R2 zone.
I'll tag on to that saying because it's an R2 zone, I'm less likely to have a concern with it.
Yeah, but I think we want it to be compatible with the architecture and to fit in appropriately. Whatever that means, we'll have to wait and see what your design is.
Any other discussions from board members? If not, I'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. This is an indefinite continuance. Bernie second, and you firsted it?
I firsted it.
Oh, I'm sorry, Denise did.
Thank you very much.
Good. And this is available online if you weren't taking enough notes.
Oh yeah, I've got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Well, I will say that that's the end of this meeting. Good night, Santa Barbara.